Unrest Podcast.
Welcome to episode 9 of the Unrest Podcast. How's everyone doing? I'm Carter Coyle.
I'm Madeline Green.
And I'm Caitlin Stansel. We are switching things up a bit with this episode, and we are starting with this week's Real Life Spook because we have two special guests here with us. Joining us on our recording, Ben Hoover and his daughter Hollis. Hey guys, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having us.
It's fun to have a real life spooks in real life.
Yeah.
It was very weird. We were on a family vacation here recently, and it was just, I'm a news anchor by trade, so I'm a little skeptical of things like this, but that night was definitely something was going on. So
Very cool. Well, tell us a little bit about yourselves, guys. You said you're a news anchor, so that's how we kind of found you, was through Caitlin's aunt who follows you up in the upstate. But tell us about you, your family.
that's right. Well, I'm a news anchor by trade, and I work at the CBS affiliate in Greenville, South Carolina. I've also worked at WIS in Columbia. Hollis is a upcoming 6th grader here in Columbia,
Mm-hmm.
and she's excited to start in the fall. And basically, she's just been in quarantine and doing the whole e-learning and schooling and all that kind of stuff. And now I guess our summer vacation continues. But we wanted to start it off with a trip to Jekyll Island with Hollis Anderson, her 15-year-old brother, and Rachel, their mama. And so we planned a weekend to Jekyll Island in Georgia. And, I knew a little bit about it. I knew, like movies had been filmed there. It's a beautiful scenery with the Spanish moss trees. And we booked at the Jekyll Island Club. When you book a hotel, you don't read its history or anything like that. We went into it completely not knowing anything about the history there and the stories and the legends and things that had happened. And so that's just kind of how the weekend started.
I bet you'll be looking up your hotel history from now on.
I mean, if I won't, their mother definitely will.
So Hollis, you're 11 years old, right?
Yes.
And you're the one that kind of had the actual spooky encounter at the hotel, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And when we first got there, you and Mama felt something in the hotel. I mean, it's
Yes,
already an
definitely.
older hotel. Explain to them a little bit about what it kind of felt like in there.
So there's like a long, like kind of drive, like to get to like the whole like kind of place. So it looked really nice. Like it was like a sunny day and it felt really warm and just like good. But then like kind of as you got up to the hotel and everything, you kind of felt, well, at least I did and my mom did, felt kind of more of like a spooky vibe and like kind of felt like there was something about that place that was off, like definitely.
Ooh. It's like lined with kind of the big trees and everything, right?
Yes.
Okay. That sets the stage.
Mm-hmm.
And I dropped them off at the front entrance, and then I went to park the car. And when I parked the car and came up into the room, I kind of knew immediately that they were feeling something, because I just, I know my daughter and I know Rachel very well. And Rachel said, "Do you like it?" I was like, "Yeah." And she said, "I don't know. Just, it's just kind of got, this very kind of vibe to it. These long hallways, these pictures of these, old men, like the picture right outside of our room. There was this historic picture, black and white picture, and a group of about 4 men. And one of the men it looked like he didn't have any eyes. Thinking back on it now, it's just too many things happened. But, we decided to give it a go. We had already, kind of gotten settled. And we went to the pool for a little bit, and then we just kind of did the whole beach thing. And then we came back that night, and, everybody was getting in their bed and all that. I put on the Trump rally, his speech that night in Tulsa, and we were watching that. The children were, going to sleep, and they had both gone to sleep during the rally. and we were still up watching it. I was on the side of the bed. We were on the second floor, and I was on the side of the bed that was the wall went directly outside. And we were on the second floor, and I heard down in the corner 3 knocks coming from the wall. Well, was that from the wall to the room on the other side of us, or was that the wall going outside? And I heard it again. And at that point, I leaned down to get closer to the wall. And again, we're on the second floor, so it's not like somebody could be out on the sidewalk.
Right.
That noise. And then I heard it again, a distinct, 3 knock. And honestly, I didn't think anything of it. I just thought, it may have been somebody outside banging a trash can or something. But it was like 11 o'clock at night at this point, 10:30, 11 o'clock. And I just didn't think anything of it. And then all of a sudden, Hollis sat straight up in her bed. And tell them what you told us.
Okay, so stood up straight in my bed and kind of looked around the room a little bit. And I just said oh, I just had a really scary dream. And what was in my dream basically was this. We were at the hotel and the resort and everything, and it was fine. But we come across this super tall lady who slumped over and would just look straight at you in your eyes and just smile so wide. And she would say may I help you? She would always be asking you that, and you didn't even bother her. But it was kind of a short dream, but I just stood straight up, which was so weird. Usually I don't do that. I've never done that in my dreams, but that was basically kind of what happened. And that from there, that's when we kind of started thinking, oh, this place isn't so fun and happy.
Especially her mother. Her mother's very in tune with that kind of stuff. And I laid there and I thought, you know what? I bet this place might be haunted because, it was very old. It kind of had a Grove Park Inn kind of feel. If you've ever,
Yep.
Where, very old, but still, you knew that there was a lot of history there at that hotel. So I just immediately did a Google search and just did Jekyll Island. I don't even know what I Googled. Jekyll Island haunted. Yeah. That's what I did. Jekyll Island haunted. And all this stuff started coming up.
Especially the Island Club there has a lot of ghost history.
Yes, it's all about the island. You're exactly right. It's the hotel, and it's on pretty much every top 10 list of most haunted hotels in America. A lot in Charleston, a lot in New Orleans, but this one in particular. And I start reading, and I was kind of reacting to it, going, "Oh my gosh!" And Rachel started going, "What is it?" And I said, "Some of these stories involve people seeing ghosts, like Hollis just mentioned." A very tall butler type man who appears in the hallways, and when you walk towards him, he kind of steps backwards. Lady similar to what Hollis explained.
Really? Oh my gosh.
A very tall woman. It was just weird that she had mentioned specifically a very tall woman with a very wide grin. And some of these descriptions and there was one book that I pulled up. It was they were excerpts from this book where this guy went around and to all these different hotels, and he actually set up shop there or got a job there and experienced all this stuff. And they talked about J.P. Morgan, how he lived there for a long time. The guy who started Wall Street lived there. This man he was a railroad tycoon. Apparently his favorite room there in the annex of the hotel, which we were in the annex of the hotel, that he comes back and visits his favorite suite. And sometimes people will go in and take a shower and come back out, and there will be newspaper laid out and a coffee cup full of coffee that wasn't there, because he likes to come back and have his morning coffee and read the morning.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild. That sounds like a nice ghost.
That's the whole thing about it. That's why, I was a little bit nervous, but nothing seemed sinister or like you said, they seemed to be friendly. They, maybe they were trying to spook you a little bit, but it didn't seem like they were trying to do any of these stories that I was reading, anything bad. It was just very, I guess, interesting to me. But I think reading more, I think we may have been in that guy's suite, because the description of the room that he appears in apparently is second floor annex, last door on the left, and that is the room we were in, right?
That sounds exactly like it. Oh my goodness.
I think we were in that room.
Hollis, did you get the feeling in your dream that the woman was bad or evil, or was it more just creepy? I mean, what was your feeling about her intention?
Definitely in the dream, I felt a creepy vibe, and it was like she was, I don't know, I felt like she was not really a nice ghost.
Yeah. The more I read about it, apparently people hear the knocks on the walls, the knocks that I was hearing. I was reading about that online, that it was all just lining up with, it was just too weird. And then the stairwells, apparently every time we would enter the hotel or exit, we had to go through these stairwells that, again, were very, old. The original floors, original windows, and that is where Rachel and Hollis would get weird vibes. And apparently that's where a lot of different things would happen, where people would be walking down the long hallways and see people, and then they'd get to the stairwell and the person would be gone. It was just weird. Every time we got in those stairwells, I'd maybe, Rachel and Hollis just are more in tune with this kind of stuff and just felt these vibes in these specific areas of the hotel. So we couldn't go to sleep that night.
I bet. Oh my goodness. I don't blame you.
And we had the TV on. Weird thing, and the power outlets would not charge our phones very fast. And and I've heard things about how spirits can travel through, like currents like that. And then on TV, we had on the Golden Girls, and it happened to be the episode where they were trying to solve a murder mystery in a hotel.
No way.
Yes. And then we started to watch The Jeffersons, and Hollis said, "Daddy, look." And I looked up at the TV, and there was this old-timey man character who was smoking a cigar. And apparently J.P. Morgan can sometimes be seen at the hotel smoking his cigar.
This is getting weird. No, I was thinking it's one thing to know the history of a place and then go there and seek out, like haunt people who like hauntings or ghost hunters. You go there and you know the research and the weird things that could happen. And then you can imagine it would be easy to interpret every knock and bump as a ghost. But you guys went in cold.
Totally
and
blind.
Then later, everything's lining up. So that makes it so much more authentic.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I started thinking, we had gone to dinner that night and gone out and about. And I started thinking, some of these people look a little gothic, like scene where they like to go and stay in like the hotel where like Whitney Houston died, and like they go to like Jekyll Island Club, and they, like you were explaining, where they're all into it. And this is definitely, after reading up about it, this is definitely one of those places that they seek out and they come to stay. And like you said, they may come and not experience anything at all. And here we were, just totally blind idiots going into it. We had the whole night of just too many weird, spooky things that happen to not recognize it, I guess, and not, want to tell the story.
That is so cool, guys. Very, very interesting experience.
I have two questions for Hollis. First of all, can you describe more the vibe you were feeling? Like, did you feel cold? Did you feel like someone was watching you?
Definitely at nighttime, I felt like when we were kind of walking up the stairwell and stuff, like I felt kind of like breezes behind me, and it was kind of just not what you would expect. And it was a lot like, I didn't see anybody that was like a ghost or anything, but I definitely felt that someone was there or someone was like behind you. The room felt definitely like heavy, and like someone was like watching you a little bit. Definitely felt like that.
Aren't you glad you're not quarantining in the hotel?
Oh yes. Yes.
No, that would be scary.
Well, somebody commented on my Facebook post about it and said she may have not have dreamed that she may have actually seen that woman. And
there was actually really quickly, we were going to like fill up the ice bucket that they put in like the room, and it was down in like the employees place, kind of, and the vending machine wasn't working, was out of order and everything. But there was like one lady like in the back room or something, and she was kind of like staring at me kind of the whole time, and she was folding laundry by herself with like no one there. She kind of was just like looking at me, and I didn't really think anything of it, obviously, but like it was definitely was like kind of creepy.
Now, have you ever had this type of feeling before?
Definitely not, no. If we ever stay at like a resort or like a hotel, it's definitely really happy. And I've never had this experience or never had like anything like this happen to me.
The women in Rachel's family tend to have that, I don't know what it is. It's like a sense, and it's just, I don't know. They have some Indian in them, and I've watched American Horror Story and stuff, and obviously all that's based off of, I would guess, some sort of research, but I don't know, some sort of connection to the Indians, and that place is built on Indian grounds.
There it is. That's a very common theme in the South.
Is there something to that? Because it was like where Indians were massacred and things like that.
Definitely. We did a story in Savannah the last episode and Caitlin talked about how basically the city is built on the dead. I mean, not just Native Americans, but all sorts of graves, to the point where if they're building something new and come across an old skeleton, it's hardly news. I mean, and Charleston is not far behind in terms of building on old, whether it be slave cemeteries or Native American burial grounds, and just not having, in the old days, not having a respect for those sorts of sacred areas. So you can imagine disturbing that ground could potentially create some pretty weird vibes and awaken ghosts or energy.
It's just, it's crazy. And, we checked out that next morning out of the club.
Did you really?
Yes. I mean, I did not think that Rachel and Hollis definitely would not spend another night in there. It was
you
nice.
Can't really enjoy your vacation with vibes like that.
Yeah, that doesn't go hand in hand with a kind of a beachy feel. Definitely not. So thank goodness there were other places, but it's probably hard to kind of escape in the South because there were so many, Indians here, Native Americans here, and of course, so many battles and, soldiers who were, killed and buried. So it's probably hard to escape down here in some of the older, especially in some of the older properties. I've had other people mention that they lived in an old Revolutionary War era house in Mount Pleasant, and he said growing up they would see Revolutionary War soldiers all the time. It was just
just like part of growing up.
Yeah. So it was definitely weird. And thinking back on it now, people will, the reaction was mixed. People were like, would you go back? I would go back, but Hollis and Rachel definitely would not go back.
I would definitely go back to explore it, like in the middle of the night or something. I wanted to do that, but
in the middle, you would
yes,
not.
I would. I told you I would. If I was with someone, I would.
Okay.
So now that you kind of have an idea of the history and that you're not the only one, you're like, okay, this could be kind of cool.
Yes,
very
she
neat.
said yes.
Very neat.
But she's being very brave in the middle of the day with the sunlight out. I don't know if she would do it at night, because before we left, she was really fat. Oh, this is what I wanted to ask you all. This is what I want to ask you. I also read that ghosts tend to visit children more than adults. Is that a common theme? That I think it's just weird that they chose her, the youngest in the family.
I actually looked that up before we jumped on, because I thought it was interesting that she was the one that kind of had the main experience with y'all. And this one blog I was reading said that children are, first of all, just more sensitive to that kind of energy, but
Oh.
also the reason for that is because they haven't.
It's almost like
They
they're
were
not
saying-
as they're not as jaded. Like they're maybe
Yeah.
more open.
They haven't
And-
kind of learned that it's not real yet, so they are kind of perceptive to it.
That's wild. And so many of the ghosts, the reason why they have stayed behind, especially some of the women ghosts, is because of things that have happened to their children that they have not completely, I don't know, like resolved before that they can move on, and that's a reason why they visit the children before they visit all of us skeptical adults, I guess.
You guys definitely go back and listen to our Savannah one. There's a woman, a ghost woman apparently, who wanders the square there and is still looking for her child. So there's reports even today of like a lady running up to people saying, "Help me find my baby, help me find my baby." Because she was pregnant, had her baby, and then was hanged for her crimes. And just apparently before she died, begged to hold her baby one last time, and they wouldn't let her, and all this. So it was like really messed up.
Rachel's standing in the doorway listening to that story with goosebumps running up and down her arms right now.
Yeah.
The best part of that story was that nowadays people will call the police and be like, "There's a lady with a missing baby," and then they all joke about it because it's been done so many times.
Oh my gosh. All right, we're gonna go back and watch that episode or listen to that one.
Yeah, listen to that one. They like send the rookie cops out because they know it's not real anymore, which is kind of
Oh my
messed up.
gosh.
Until there is a real woman looking for her baby.
I know, really.
Well, we know what we're doing tonight for our bedtime stories. We're listening to the podcast.
Nice. Oh.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us for this recording. We can't wait for our listeners to hear your story. Hollis, we appreciate it so much. Hopefully you don't have any more spooky experiences anytime soon.
I hope so, yes.
Thanks for having us.
Well, we plan to air this over all of the platforms where you guys listen regularly, but we will also be posting this as a video. So we took a shower today, we put on some makeup, and we're going to post this video to our YouTube channel. You can find us by searching the Unrest Podcast on YouTube.
Yeah, like Madeline said, we don't typically record these for video because we like to enjoy not being put together
That's a
while
beautiful
we're
thing.
chatting. But we just thought it was so special that Ben and Hollis could join us on our recording here and show their faces along with telling us their story. And yeah, like what an awesome story and experience. And they like encountered so many kind of
much
paranormal things.
enough to want to check out the next day and be like, okay.
Right? I know. I was laughing at them talking about, some people like to go to these places to see these type hauntings. And I'm like,
I know, we're like, Madeline's always trying to get us to go on these tours.
In her gothic attire.
my Led Zeppelin Stairway to Heaven t-shirt.
And it's cool to get it from a child's perspective, although clearly Hollis is super smart and mature for a typical 11-year-old. I think that was obvious, but to have it from her perspective was really neat too.
Like you heard Hollis say, oh, like I would love to go back and explore at night. And in the moment though, when you're experiencing it, that's like the last thing you'd ever want to do. But
Right.
afterwards you're like, well, it wasn't that bad. I'm big and brave now.
You go into it actually knowing to expect something, it's a little different. But if it happens out of the blue like that, oh, it's so creepy.
And kind of like they mentioned, Jekyll Island has this really rich history because it, is so old and so many people, different kinds of people have lived and died there. And Madeline, you looked into some of that history.
So for today's Spook School, we're going to learn about the history of Jekyll Island and the Jekyll Island Club in particular. But Jekyll Island is a great vacation spot now, but it was first inhabited by, like we talked about, Native Americans, like most places in the U.S. So I feel like they're hanging around mad at us to this day. But they traveled to the island. There's a lot of hunting and rich farming and stuff in that area. And so that's kind of why they flourished around there. Then the French kind of came in around 1562 and found, the coast of Georgia. There was thousands of these Native Americans. And then eventually the permanent settlers were, of course, the British colonists. And they began to start building and claiming all of this land as their own up and down the coast.
They were like, oh, look, you can really grow a lot of great stuff here. You've already started it for us. Let us take it over.
Appreciate it.
Right? And so eventually, General James Edward Oglethorpe founded the colony of Georgia in 1733. The island is named after a financial backer of his. His name was Sir Joseph Jekyll. And then Oglethorpe kind of gave some duties to a Major William Horton to build an outpost on the island to protect Fort Frederica, which was on St. Simon's Island. And so funny that they talked about that because I am going there for the 4th of July. I've been there a few times, and I was actually thinking about this time they do have, a ghost tour.
You guys know I'm from Georgia. 5th grade. Like your whole life, you looked forward to the 5th grade field trip, which was the first overnight field trip allowed. And our elementary school, shout out Craig Crocodiles, went to Jekyll Island every year, just the 5th graders. Well, the 5th grade class before us got in trouble, was up to no good, don't know what went down, but all I know is that I never got my chance because the next year they changed it to a day field trip to the Tennessee Aquarium.
What?
Oh, gosh.
So I still haven't been to Jekyll Island. Yeah, they didn't have a Georgia Aquarium back then. So I still have never been to Jekyll Island. The end.
Did they stay at the club?
I don't know. Where would you put a bunch of 5th graders?
I don't think they did because it's kind
Expensive.
of pricey.
Yeah, I wonder if they even just had camps or cottages or something set up on the water. I don't know. All I know is supposed to be really cool and your first time getting to see your crush out of school, and they ruined it for us.
I didn't realize that it was so close to St. Simon's, so who knows? Maybe I'll get to see it when I'm there. I'm excited to go, and hopefully I will get some ghostly stuff for you guys, so make sure you follow our social media accounts. But
you should definitely do the ghost tour.
Yeah, and I'll try and video some of it. But an interesting fact is in 1747, Georgia's first brewery came about when that William Horton that we talked about earlier, he purchased a great copper pot and began brewing beer there. And so that was the first brewery in Georgia. And so a lot of building and farming went on. There was also quite a few plantations on the island. And then in 1886, the island was purchased by the Jekyll Island Club for $125,000.
The whole island?
It?
Yep, for the whole island. But it did say that at that time, that was almost I want to say 2 billion or something like that. Sounds cheap to me. But it became kind of a well-to-do vacation spot and resort. It was also a hunting club. And members of the club included some really wealthy people like the Rockefellers, Joseph Pulitzer, and the Vanderbilts were also known to visit this club very often. So it was definitely a prestigious club and resort. Only the wealthy went there a lot of the times. But then due to World War II, club came to an end. And then in 1947, the state of Georgia bought it as a state park.
Oh.
But then they had a grand reopening in 1987. And then, like he said, it has been the backdrop for some films over the years. This is so strange, but X-Men was filmed there.
Really?
So quite a range of history on this island. And I want to go there one of these days, especially if it's haunted.
And it's apparently so haunted that they host a ghost hunting weekend every single year where they bring in a paranormal expert. You can buy a package and basically stay for 2 nights, and they have food for you, and then you go through a class for ghost hunting, and then they let you hunt for ghosts on the property. It is a little pricey, but I mean, what a cool experience. And clearly they are haunted enough that kind of thing pays off.
Well, I like some of that history. That gives a good perspective to how the club came about.
So, are you going to enamor us with some more spooky stories?
Yes, I am. In fact, Madeline, thanks for asking.
Good.
I also want to point out that I've gone through a lot of this goldfish bag. This is my pregnancy snack of choice.
But I appreciate that you mute the microphone every time you take a bite.
Oh, you
noticed.
noticed? I know. I'm crunching away, so I go mute.
I was like, how are we
you.
not hearing her?
I'm trying to be a courteous snacker.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I now quote the websites that we found on this topic, but there are quite a few different ghost stories and strange occurrences all over Jekyll Island and that whole kind of Sea Island area of Georgia. So these phenomena are not new. And according to this one website, I think it's Hodnet Cooper, they were saying that apparitions have actually been reported for years throughout that whole 240-acre area of the National Historic Landmark District, Jekyll Island. And nearly every cottage, every house that you come across has some sort of mystery and restless soul or tragic story associated with it. So there's a lot of untimely deaths and adventures and mischief, and it seems to just be kind of stuck on the island. So one tour guide, it looks like her name is Zinda. She says that one time a woman captured an orb on her cell phone, and on that same tour, the guide reported feeling cold spots following her. She went through a cold spot and then it stuck with her through portions of the tour of Dubignon Cottage. And a couple of the other more French named things definitely lean toward that makes sense now that you mentioned, Madeline, the history of the French. So other people have seen like flickering lights and empty buildings as the tour, that one specific tour I was talking about, went through these moss-draped live oaks. They could see kind of what they thought were spirits moving and lights on in windows. And it's all kind of, you can imagine, plays with your mind when there's moss draped on the oaks and you're walking around experiencing it. There's also,
and I will say, like, for you to feel a cold spot in the South when it's like so humid and hot, I mean, that would immediately give
it would
you
stand
goosebumps.
out. Yeah, it would stand out. You're not going to forget that because it would probably feel really good until you realize you walked through a ghost, you know?
Like right now, I am feeling some breeze coming up from behind because I'm sitting on top of the air conditioned register. I'm about to freeze to death.
That's strategic. Love it. Yeah, so the cold spots are very common experiences there. Hearing like voices and laughter and Victrola music playing, kind of a nod to the old days out of nowhere. That's apparently another common occurrence. And then people even seeing spirits walking around in their period dress costumes. And we've heard this in other cities, but kind of assuming at first maybe it's a tour guide or something like that, and then realizing there's something ghostly to it. Especially if they're in like a shuttered down historic building and you're like, that's a little strange. So that same website was saying that guides have basically noted a lot of different individuals who they think some of these ghosts are over the years because they compare the descriptions to historic photographs. So they really do take it seriously there, and they want to kind of figure out who these spirits are. So some of the folks that they think are commonly seen are William and Savannah Struthers, Eddie Gold Jr., and Walter Jennings. And many, many others appear, but in so many ghost story cases, we have no idea who they are, kind of what their stories are. And Caitlin nodded to this earlier, but as all of these mysteries have kind of piled on over the years, Jekyll Island Museum, the staff really embraced it. They started collecting the stories, and during October, they share all of these unusual stories they've heard over the years. And so there are different tours where you can go on and see where people have seen apparitions or felt the cold spots, and kind of where all these unexplained events have heard. So guests can take part of that, but they can also rent out these cottages. And unknowingly, that's what Ben and Hollis did. It sounds like they got kind of a top spot in the club. And the club, and Madeline, you might know this better than I do, but it sounds like it's one main hotel, but then there's lots of little cottages that you can rent out.
Yeah.
And one of those is the Sansuchi house. Sansuchi? This is kind of
sushi.
I would love sushi. Yes. Very cool. this is interesting because it's the French
You
name
can't
for
have sushi.
yeah.
Sorry.
No, I know I can't. It has to be fried sushi. Tempura. The French name sans sushi means worry free. And that's basically was the whole point of this particular building on site. It was, according to JekyllIsland.com, one of the nation's first condominiums. So, okay, think about it now. My family does not have like condos all over the place or anything like that, but like some people have their beach condo that the family goes to every year, or maybe a lake house their family goes to. Well, this was like the concept of this was first started there at Jekyll Island. They know there was a condo in Manhattan called the Rembrandt Building, and that was a similar, where it wasn't your primary home, it was a second home type deal for wealthy people. But the second known one was the club on Jekyll Island in this building. So they would go to the main hotel and drink and smoke and fish and that sort of thing, but they apparently really wanted their own section in their own building that didn't have any kids running around making noises. So there were no kids allowed, and they wouldn't even sell to families who had kids. So
my kind of place.
I know. So it was actually originally divided into 6 units, and now there are 24 that are rented out. And again, this is where JP Morgan owned one of the rooms or one of the condos. So there are, lots of stories of him or of other wealthy people who that was their goal, was to get away, to live a worry-free life, have a vacation. So it kind of makes sense that maybe that's where they would retire in death, so to speak, because that's how much it meant to them. And so now, again, it's a 24-room property. Now, also on Jekyll Island, there's a place called the Horton House. And I couldn't find a whole lot of specific examples of hauntings there, but it was more just talking about how it was a relic of the colonial past. It was built for, and I'm kind of doing a lot of history here too for this one, because I didn't have specific ghost sightings that I saw, but it's very often visited on ghost tours and experiences. So they actually built it out of tabby, like oyster tabby, if you're familiar with that. So if you ever see driveways that are made with crushed oyster, which is like kind of a upgrade to your normal driveway, the whole place is built in that. It's really cool looking, and it's still standing, although it's empty and a little bit on the rundown side. So it's just run as a historic house site now. The Dubignon Cemetery, so from that other house, that's across the street. So it's all connected. It's all nearby. But all of this, the damage, the battles, the war history in the area, led to lots of creepy sightings near this Horton House as well. So it's kind of an interesting spot that you can visit, I believe, for free and see if you have any experiences there. And then next door to all of this, not too far away, is St. Simon's, which Ben and Hollis mentioned. And I thought a kind of a cool example of a St. Simon's haunting was the lighthouse there. Now, I have been to St. Simon's because that's where we partied for Georgia, Florida every year, and then went down to Jacksonville for the actual game. But I must say, in college, we weren't super involved in exploring the history of the area. We were busy getting drunk on Frat Beach. But
you're exploring the brewery.
Yeah. We were not really looking at like hiking the lighthouse or anything. So I should probably go and have an adult experience. But there is just something kind of about lighthouses in general that associate them with ghostly occurrences and with spooky things. And I'm not sure what that is, other than maybe they're known to be dark and tall and hard to escape. And then the people who live in them, I mean, it's who live. I don't really know if they're still functioning ones, but this is a 24/7 job. So, I mean, it becomes your whole life, and therefore maybe it becomes your whole death too. You stick around to make sure things are still okay.
Well, and I think it's that they're just all really old too. It's not like they are building new lighthouses now, because boaters have GPS. They have all these other, kind of electronic gadgets to know that there's a barrier island ahead that they might run into.
it doesn't have to necessarily be haunted by the lighthouse keeper. It could be, a ship that crashed on shore and
Sure.
everyone died or something along those lines.
That's a good point. And this article, Explore Southern History, it talks about that a little bit, in that they were kind of like dungeons of ancient times, but instead of going down deep, they went up high. And that they're in specifically and purposely put in isolated locations. That's the whole point. So that makes sense. Now, the St. Simon's Outhouse has been there since 1872 on the coast of Georgia, and the lighthouse keeper at the time in 1880 was Frederick Osborne, and he and an assistant, they kept that lighthouse operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They shared the assistant and Frederick shared a home next door with their family. So you had the main lighthouse guy, Frederick, on the bottom with his family, and then assistant on the top with his family. And there was like a central stairway that connected them. Well, the ghost story goes that Osborne, suddenly the main keeper, spoke in a inappropriate way to the wife of the assistant guy. They got upset, they fought, and the assistant, John Stevens, shot and killed Osborne, the main keeper. So according to this website, Stevens was arrested, charged with murder. But then after hearing how it all went down, the jury acquitted him of his charges. So I guess they were like, oh, he spoke inappropriately to your wife? Murder justified. And after that, that's kind of that's a little bit of background, because not long after that, and not long after all of their deaths, there started being reports of a ghost at St. Simon's Island, and specifically in the lighthouse, and newspaper clippings across the country have cited this before. And at one point, the wife of a later keeper, her husband's out of town, so she, it's her job to kind of fill in while he's gone, and she was having issues in the lighthouse. And apparently Frederick Osborne, that original lighthouse keeper, had once told, it was kind of known that he said, if you ever need help, just yell out for me. So in frustration, she finally yelled out, okay, fine, Frederick, come and fix it. I can't figure it out. She said she heard some noise, looked over, and saw the figure of that French-Canadian former lighthouse keeper bending over, working on the lighthouse mechanisms, trying to help fix things. She passed out because she was so freaked out. Reasonable. And then came to hearing kind of the click, click, click of the normal lighthouse operation. He's gone. Lighthouse is working again. And so some people say that his death was so sudden that he never stopped his nightly routine, inspecting and fixing up the lighthouse, and that his figure has been seen all over, not just in, but around the area, and that lots of people hear his voice or footsteps in that spiral staircase leading all the way up to the top.
Spooky.
Yeah, so that's St. Simon's one would be cool. Nick and I climbed the Huntington Island Lighthouse, which is not far from Beaufort, but sounds like you should check out the lighthouse while you're there, Madeline.
I kind of knew that story from going a long time ago, and of course there were stories of it being haunted, but I didn't know the actual story. So I will definitely try and get some pictures of it. What's his name? Frederick
Osborne. Yeah, listen for some footsteps and try to get an orb.
Call out to him for help with your headphones.
Those are some fun, spooky stories from Jekyll Island, St. Simon's. I'm sure there are plenty more, and we'd obviously love to hear any of your real life encounters, whether it's in one of those places or elsewhere.
I think this was definitely a fun episode.
We mixed it up a little for episode 10.
Yeah.
Oh, 9.
I think this is
9. Dang it, 9. Whatever. Number 9. Number 9.
Yeah. So like Carter said, we definitely want to hear you guys' real life spooks. And it was fun actually getting to see them and see their reactions, to their stories. There are several ways that you can reach us. You can email your real life spook to the Unrest Podcast at gmail.com or
call us at 843-564-2101.
Do you hear my husband making ghost noises in the other room?
Thought it was Frederick.
Damn it, Frederick, be quiet.
No one takes us seriously.
Thank y'all for listening. Hey, we'll put you on here too if you want to hop on Zoom. We are flexible. We take all means of ghost stories in different formats. And thank you again for listening.
And
Unrest in peace.